After e4, d6, d4, knight f6, knight to c3, g6. Black is playing the Pirc defense. White goes on with bishop g5, and after bishop to g7, queen to d2. This is something we have seen in the first video of this chapter. There's one line we need to look at before we move on to the following ones. So castle and long castle, and now knight b to d7. So as mentioned in the first video, you play e5 now, and we went through knight e8 afterwards. We're going to look right now at what happens when pawn takes. Okay, pawn takes back. This is actually even better for white. So we're going to have a quick look at this and then we move on. Knight to e8 is now met with knight to d5. Crashing move. We have a lot of attack over this square. Bishop e7 would be trapping the queen. So you're completely winning. The only move here for black to stop that from happening would mean to basically give up material. Something like knight f6 maybe. But that's a tragedy, as you can tell. What happens if f6? It really looks like it stops everything, but now knight to f4. And now pawn takes g5 is met with knight e6, still trapping the queen, and there is no coming back already. You see, what is black going to do to stop knight e6 trapping the queen? Let's say e6, with the idea of getting the queen out, would be met by simply knight takes, and now queen moves, and now knight takes rook. We're up a rook. Our opponent will have to take back. If not, then we're going to be up material more and more. We're also going to develop. It's a winning endgame. Well, let's see. For instance, let's say knight takes knight. Okay, now how do we capitalize and just convert this to a completely winning endgame? It is already winning. Position evaluated +4 or +5. But let's see. Okay, now bishop here. We're just going to trade bishop in h6. Looks like black can maybe recapture some material, but still. Take. Now queen d5 check. King moves. Obviously, because if bishop blocks, then you can take this pawn. It's completely fine to take. No poisonous pawns at all. Now knight to f3, double attack on the pawn. The knight is going to go inevitably to e5. And bishop is going to c4. The other rook is coming. I mean, yeah, bishop blocks here. Doesn't help because you simply take this pawn. I mean, bishop pins the knight. Doesn't help. You take the pawn in b7. You're completely winning. So in this position, if the queen takes the knight. Okay, same thing. Just develop. Bishop check. King moves. Take the pawn. Now we're just swapping everything. Knight d takes back. And now develop the knight. Development is almost complete. Bishop g4, pinning the knight. Threatening to maybe smash a pawn structure, but that's still refuted with queen to f4. After knight to d6, these are all best moves by our opponent, attacking the bishop. Bishop takes. Obviously, we've removed the defender of this bishop, so black shouldn't take this bishop, because then we're winning even more. So after the best move, queen takes. Bishop to d5. Protects the knight, make sure that our opponent doesn't break our pawn structure. c6 attacking the bishop, h3. This is the best reply. The bishop will have to move away. And we carry on. We're up the exchange and the pawn. So here you might be wondering, after the knight takes the rook, what if our opponent just takes our bishop, considering that this knight seems to be trapped, and then maybe get 2 pieces for a rook. Well, no, because you're going to take this knight. And as you notice here, you have a lot of attack over d7. That means you're winning even more. This knight is now completely safe. Especially imagine after playing bishop c4, what happened to the arrow, bishop c4 and then e6. So let's do from the start so that we familiarize better. The early knight f6 and then knight c3, g6, bishop g5 immediately, bishop g7, queen d2, castle. This is actually very easy. And now knight to d7, we punish it immediately with e5. So we already went through knight e8 in the first video. As mentioned in this video, we're going to go through take, knight e8 again. Because what else? d5, e4 are attacked by the knight. g4 and h5, the knight gets trapped, right? So in g4, well, the knight doesn't get trapped immediately, but is under threat of being trapped. Here you will play f4, And after h6 you play bishop to h4, attacking a bishop, and the knight's got nowhere to go, right? A move like h3 now will trap the knight. So our opponent really has nothing that can be done. Best move by the engine will be here c6, to allow the queen out and also to avoid annoying bishop c4, e6 idea, putting so much pressure on this knight and making it unable to move. Now white plays h3. And in this position, knight to h5, g4 already does trap the knight. So let's go back to this position. So here the knight will have to play to e8. Okay, knight to d5, attacking the square e7. So after f6 only move, knight to f4. So there's an immediate threat of trapping the queen. That means the black can't take a bishop. We went already through e6 and then queen e7, see that it doesn't work. Let's look at c6, allowing the queen an escape out from the diagonal. Okay, bishop c4 check. Blocking doesn't make sense, you can just take. King moves, and now knight takes g6. Haha, check. Only move is pawn takes, and now queen to c3, threatening mate very soon. There is nothing that black can do here. What the engine does to resist this move is this crazy knight takes e5 move, giving literally the queen away, but at least allowing the bishop to protect the h3 square, which is really obviously the square from where we were going to do a mate in 2. Now we can't go to h3, so the best move is to take the queen and carry on with the game. So let's go from the start and see something different. Knight f6, knight c3, fianchetto, and then bishop g5, bishop g7, queen to d2. Align these two pieces like this. Castle, castle. And right now we're going to go through rook to e8. Another normal move. Now the way we deal with this is something that obviously you need to refer to the first videos. Always look, every time you see one of my new videos, always look at the previous ones, because they're all a continuation of the previous one. So here you play h4. And for more info, go and watch the other videos. You know exactly what the plan is here. So h4, you want to play h5 and crash the opponent king side and put this rook on an open file. This queen and this bishop perfectly aligned with each other. If you were to swap this bishop for this one, and the queen were to infiltrate in h6 with the defense of this rook, it will be game over. Now here, a move like knight to d7, you might think it can happen now, but no, still forbidden. You play e5, so you know the pattern here. Again, this pawn cannot be taken because you will take back, and this knight cannot take in e5 because you're gonna have two attackers over this queen. You're winning a lot of material. So here the knight just has to move. Knight to h5 and you play g4, trapping the knight. You recognize the patterns now? You don't have to memorize moves. You just see something before, and if you know how to deal with a specific defense, then these patterns will just happen again and again. f6 now, trying to counterattack our bishop. You simply play bishop e3, saving the bishop, and this knight remains trapped. So back in this position, after h4, we notice that knight d7 is the same type of mistake. Okay, what happens after h5? Very annoying move that basically stops our plan from going forward. Okay, well, no problem, because we're actually still completely fine. f3 comes now, and obviously you know what's going to happen. g4 and crash the opponent's pawns on the king side. Best move by black will be a6. The idea, as you know, here will be b5, b4, coming down with the queen, attacking here, bringing the rook to b8, and then, yeah, like it's the usual plan of the French players and the Pirc players. Every time that your opponent plays a passive defense, that's usually the plan. Just this slow, silly attack on the queen side. But meanwhile, you've conquered the center. So you don't have to worry about these slow attacks on the side. You carry on and play g4. So now, obviously, let's go through pawn takes. But before we do that, let's go through b5, right? Black carrying on with the usual plan. Okay, now here you take the knight first, because we are slowly removing the defenders of the opponent king side. The more we remove, the more empty will be the squares around the opponent king, and we can put our major pieces. So pawn takes back, and either pawn to bishop, whatever. You take here as well now. Pawn takes back. Yeah, you might argue pawn takes, bishop takes would have given a more good-looking pawn structure for black, but actually this is better in a way that the rook is now more effective. The queen can also move around and try to join the king side. And this pawn in h5 was going to be taken no matter what. Now white goes on with knight to e2. Nothing to do here, nothing stops us from playing knight to f4, knight to h5, rook to g1, and put pressure on this. Nothing stops us from doing that. A move like b4 is met with knight to d5. So that's the best way to put the knight. Don't put the knight in b1. You don't need to. The knight in d5 is doing just fine. You can put this knight in f4 if you want. And if instead, let's say, our opponent plays f5, the idea to get the queen to be more effective on this diagonal, and also this is the best move. Also put more attack over this pawn, and potentially allows the bishop to go to g5 later on after the swap in the center. You play rook to g1. It's just too late for black to do anything, because now we're also threatening queen h6. And then if we do queen h6, there's no way, there's no coming back. If black plays queen to f6, you can just take the queen for free. The bishop is pinned. So black can't allow that. If black plays instead pawn takes, now here queen h6 isn't the best, because I forgot to mention something I should have mentioned before. Bishop to g4 here is kind of an annoying move to me, because then the bishop will have an attack on our queen, so we can't really take this bishop. And so the best move now is knight to f4, as mentioned. And the pawn cannot take this pawn because knight h5 wins the game immediately. No coming back here, double attack here, the bishop is pinned. And even if the pawn had done something else, let's say e3, attacking the queen, queen to g2 should end this game. Queen to f6, you think? Okay, well, knight to h5, attacking this and this. So back in this position, straight as after playing g4, we went through b5 and so on. What happens when black takes here? We don't take back, because as you notice, there are two attackers. We don't need to do that. Of course, we just go on with h5. The idea was to open the file. And now when the pawn takes and you can swap the bishop for the knight, then your pieces are infiltrating, the rook is coming, and there's no coming back for black. If knight takes, then what do? Take the pawn here, surprisingly. What were you expecting? A sacrifice of the rook? I would have done it, for sure, 100%. If it happened in a game, I would have done it. But this is not the best move. Pawn takes g4 is the best move, even though we can be recaptured by the bishop with an attack on this rook and an extra defense of the knight. Unbelievably, but this is the best move. How to go on now? Bishop to e2. And this is beautiful, because what this means is that what we're going to do is open the file at any cost. Even if we have to give up a few pawns, a few tempos, a few pieces, a few queens, a few kings, it doesn't matter. As long as the files are open, that's when we start dancing. Bishop takes, obviously, because if the bishop had moved, then you will be taking in h5, and that's really crazy, because then you take back and the game plays itself. Or as Hans Niemann will say, the game will speak for itself. Knight g takes back. And now after knight developing, going for a double pressure over the pawn in d4, stopping our knight from moving, well, in case we don't want to lose another pawn, a central pawn. However, white goes on with rook d to g1, and now this king is on borrowed time. There's no coming back here already. Let's say black goes on with the attack, let's say b5, just to make an example, any move. Here he will sacrifice the rook. Rook takes, and after the pawn takes back, bishop to h6, and that's it. So in this position, what happens if instead the black player, straight after playing rook d to g1, if black plays f6, attacking our bishop, we have to remove the bishop, and now bishop to h6 is the best move. Obviously taking here is a suicide, because we're gonna involve the queen very close to the king, and now best moves would be king to f7, allowing some sort of idea of defending the bishop further, as rook g8 or something. Here you take, and now king takes back is not possible because rook takes knight, the pawn in g6 will be pinned. Knight takes back, queen to h6, so we're threatening the square g6 now. g5 stopping that attack, Knight to f4. That's a beautiful sacrifice. Well, of course, if pawn takes, the game will play for itself. I mean, let's say pawn takes, then rook check. If king goes up, you got a low mower checkmate. If king goes to e6, then queen h3. Mate next move. So in this position, best move would be e5 by black, allowing more escape to the king, but still, that's not going to happen. Queen g6 check should allow you to take this knight with check as well later on. If the king goes up, then you also got the involvement of the other rook, and you take it from here. So let's go from the start. We're going to look at something different. Knight f6, knight c3, g6, bishop g5, and now instead of bishop g7, we're going to go through two ideas. Knight d7 immediately instead of bishop g7, and h6. So let's see, knight b2 d7, the idea is to play e5 and cement the center like that. Here white plays knight to f3. We are fighting for the square e5. The black Pirc player will play e5 at some point, right? That's obviously the plan. And this can actually happen. e5. So how to deal with this? Take. And now, two ways to take back. Well, actually only one way to take back, which is with the knight. But still, this loses the game. Let's say black takes with the knight. Now you just take. Pawn takes back. Queen takes queen. Only move king takes. And now you take the knight and the rook. So that's literally what happens. So in this position, after the pawn takes the pawn, if pawn takes, then you take back, and now black can't take back because of the exact same reason. Queen takes, and then the bishop will be taking this knight, and that's it. Bishop to g7 now, and now bishop to b5. Capitalizing on this knight, we're also up a pawn, and now black shouldn't castle because we'll be winning even more material. c6 seems like the logical move here, but you just sacrifice. Knight takes e6. Haha. And now pawn takes back, because there was an attack on the queen. Bishop takes back, there's an attack on the knight. I mean, the knight is well defended, but there's also an attack on the rook. So rook to b8, and now queen to d6. Attacks the rook, the knight is pinned, we don't have to worry. And there's no coming back here. Now, obviously, rook going for the pawn in b2, for example, just saving the rook, loses to e5. So we're going to be taking material. This rook has no attacks. The knight can't really be saved. You can't play h6 because then you can take the knight and also the bishop with an attack on the rook. So if the queen just moves to a5, is the best move, with an attack on the knight, threatening to also give us a check, you castle, you ignore the knight. And now there's still an attack on this knight. When this knight moves, you can take it. Whatever he moves, you can take it. If he moves somewhere far away, let's say g4, then you got a threat on e7 with a checkmate. So queen takes knight here. You just take in f6. And you're winning because you're going to be able to infiltrate with the rooks. Here there's a forced mate in 28, according to the engine, which means that basically the engine will just sacrifice all the possible material in order to delay the checkmate. But it's checkmate unstoppable. Obviously the bishop can't take the bishop here, the pawn here, because then you can just take, and this knight is pinned. So you're winning material. If the bishop goes to f8, challenging a very strong queen, then rook check, king moves, and now rook e7. And we're gonna finalize the attack over the square d7 with too many attackers. Bishop takes is met with pawn takes, check, king has to move again. It's such a torture. Although it might not be clear why we're completely winning here. I mean, well, obviously the reason is clear, but how we're completely winning? Well, this is the key move now, queen to c7. And this is where the engine will have to start sacrificing stuff. So here you will play something like queen a5, just giving up the queen just to stop us from going to d8. But even then, it won't really matter, checkmate is coming. And in this position, by the way, after the stunning move, queen to d6, forgot to mention how bishop b7 obviously doesn't work because you have bishop takes here with check. Queen takes back and the rook falls. Knight takes back and the queen falls. King takes bishop and the king falls. No, I'm kidding. So let's go from the start. Knight f6, knight c3, g6. Okay, the bishop goes there straight away. And now we're looking at this variation that we haven't looked at yet. h6 immediately attacking our bishop. Okay, the bishop goes back to e3. And now you don't have to worry about another attack on the bishop from the knight in g4, simply because queen takes knight, and then bishop takes our queen. Yes, we've lost the queen, but at least we took our opponent knight. No, I'm joking. Knight to g4 attacks the bishop. We just move the bishop all the way to c1. And we take it from here. So now the knight can go back to f6. Now white goes on with h3. So now the knight can go back and white goes on with h3. Because h3 was going to happen anyway to attack the knight. Okay, bishop to g7. It looks like our opponent has released the pressure. Okay, bishop to e3. And now our bishop is safe in e3. It looks like we wasted tempos, but in reality we have caused this serious weakness. And you don't know how serious that is. But stick around and you will see. Castle, queen to d2, usual patterns. After watching this video and the other Pirc videos, you're gonna crash the Pirc because you're gonna know it so well. King to h7 now, the usual move to obviously put more defense over the square h6 because we were threatening to go there. g4. So it was black that made a mistake by going to g4 and coming back, because it gave us the possibility to play h3, g4, and now these pawns are supporting each other. e5, best move by black. What else can black do? Black doesn't really have any other attacking piece here. He will have to play the knight, but the knight is far from the game. The bishop is useless. This bishop is in the fianchetto, not on this diagonal, or I mean this one. And now white just closes the center with d5. You need to close the center because we're attacking the flank. It's important principle. c6, challenging the center, typical move of the Pirc. Ignore it. Play g5, attacking the knight, attacking this pawn. Even black responding with the best move doesn't work. H takes, and now knight to f3, ignoring that. We're also obviously going for this pawn. So instead of just taking stuff back, you want to develop. Always develop. King to g8, realizing that the king now is in trouble. Knight takes, because of course, well, if the pawn had pushed, then you can take back with the discovered attack. So knight takes in g5. Black's best move now b5, going for an attack on our knight, and obviously putting maybe the queen, developing the queen somewhere. But look, our opponent king is completely unsafe, and the thing is that there is no way for black to actually use the pieces in order to defend the king, mostly because of this annoying f7 pawn, annoying for black. Black's pieces literally don't have access to their own king. White now plays a3. This move is there to stop the knight from being kicked out. We need the knight in c3 to keep defending these two squares. They're very important. And after a5, h4. So you know where this is going already. You can also play bishop e2, and when the knight goes to h5, you can take. So bishop to g4 now. How do we react to this? The bishop is defending the square h5. This is the best move. f3, kick the bishop away. And when the bishop goes to h5, okay, now take the pawn in c6. We also now attacking b5. So, well, after knight takes back, developing, bishop takes in b5. Position is falling apart. We're attacking the knight. Queen to c7 defends the knight and still protects the pawn in d6, which is also a square where we want to go to. We double the attack on d6. We are definitely going there. There is nothing here. Black can't just play, I don't know, rook a to b8 attacking the bishop. I mean, putting pressure on the bishop, developing the rook. Because you just go to d6. You're completely winning. The knight is defending the bishop. There's nothing to fear. These two pawns defend each other. This knight here defend the pawn in f3. You never have to worry about this fork. So queen takes d6 wins. If black doesn't play rook to b8, but rather plays bishop to h6, removing this incredible knight from there with the idea of playing bishop takes f3 with a fork on the two rooks, that would be a better situation for black than for white. Okay, here, take the pawn in d6. Believe it or not. Well, we have an attack on the queen, so after queen takes and rook takes, we have an attack on this knight. If the bishop takes, we can take back And then we also have an attack on this bishop, and when the bishop takes in f3, we can still remove our rook. So we're not losing any material, we're winning material. Black going away, let's say to d4, for instance, you just take this knight. So that was a fork. There is no compensation. So let's go from the start and look at something else. g6, bishop g5, and look at the immediate h6, attacking the bishop, bishop e3. We mentioned why knight g4 doesn't work here, but you know what the plan is. Let's look at this move. Bishop to g4, we immediately attacking the queen. Here the best move is f3. You might be thinking of playing queen d2, because it looks like it makes so much sense. But in reality, f3 kind of brings forward your plan of playing g4, h4, h5, or g5, whatever, depending on what black does. So f3 is a good move against the Pirc. Black plays bishop to d7. And now we can already start an attack. e5. The knight's got nowhere to go, really, that makes sense. Unless he wants to get trapped. Take, take, knight to h7, queen to e2. The idea is to long castle and then obviously take it from there. Let's go on. e6. Let's look at this idea. Well, after long castle, let's look at this. Bishop b4, the idea of taking here in c3. Okay, well, knight to e4. You don't want to allow this very ugly trade. Knight to e4 is a very strong move. Position evaluated as if white was up a piece. Now, after castling, h4. This is not going to last very long. Knight to c6, developing and attacking this pawn. Okay, bishop h6 attacks the rook. The rook is moving. See, this is a very weird variation. You wonder why I'm showing this. But the reason why the position is so ugly for black is obviously because black played that bishop g4 move, and now you know exactly how to punish it. Rook moves now h5, and we are smashing the king side. There's nothing else to do. g5 here is protected by two pieces. You might wonder what if the black player wants to keep the files closed instead of opening them. Okay, well, f4, and now we are opening them. So you might be wondering, okay, after h5, what if black takes this pawn with the knight? It looks like a great move. Also puts more defense over g6. Okay, attack the knight first. The knight will have to move. And after he's done moving, we can, let's say knight c6. Now we can keep the attack going on the king side. Pawn takes, position evaluated plus 10 or something like that. Queen to g4 ends the game.